if I could divest myself for a moment, and if you at all please move up by 12 inches. That's a lot, maybe 14. That way we'll make room for everybody. Thank you everyone for coming today. We'll have a brief time to talk about the tenets of Krishna consciousness. And before I begin, I offer my respects to my spiritual master, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And to all of you, thank you very much for sincerely treading the path of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the footsteps of the great acharyas. Vancha kalpatarubhascha kripasindhyacha titanam pavanidyo. In the first publications that Srila Prabhupada made to fortify our movement, and as he often said, our movement was based on our transcendental literatures. Although we have an institution, the institution would hardly have a standing in the world without the backing of the Vedic literatures. We have the Śrī Īśopaniṣad, which is one of the original Vedas, and we have the Śrīmad Bhagavatam, which is a summary study, or not a summary study, it's an explanation of the Vedanta Sutra. We have the Bhagavad Gita, which is also called the Gita-Upanishad, and numerous other literatures. Nectar of Devotion, which is a Rasa Shastra, explains how it is that as conscious living beings, as we can see in this world, we have natural relationships and emotions. And the author Rupa Goswami shows how those emotions are real. It's not that we would expunge those emotions and our desires, but we would redirect them for perfection in life to Kṛṣṇa, who is the rasa Vaiśeṣika. He's the one who can reciprocate all rasas. Rasa means the taste we get from a relationship, and Rupa Goswami mentions, and Srila Prabhupada in a summary of Rupa Goswami's teachings in the Nectar of Devotion says that everyone's looking for a taste, and we get that taste in life from our relationships. However, in this world, relationships are temporary. No matter which relationship we have in this world, it will have a beginning and an end. However, our relationship with Kṛṣṇa, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and I emphasize personality because how can one have a relationship except with a person? And a few thoughts I would like to express today about the book called the Śrī Īśopaniṣad. It's a highly recommended book. My godbrother Palaka Prabhu was just telling me about it when I was upstairs, and he was saying how when one of our godbrothers, Rupanuga Prabhu, one of the exalted leaders of our movement from the early days, had gone on the Susskind show. What's his first name? David Susskind. And there was a popular show on television. And he asked, did Rupanuga, Prabhupada, what should I talk about? Prabhupada mentioned that you should recite the verses of the Śrī Īśopaniṣad. Yeah.
Actually, after the David Susskind show, he sent a letter to Prabhupada. Prabhupada was pleased because 11 million people watched it. And then Rupanuga got free airtime on all the local New York radio stations, like, you know, free 30-second, 60-second little things. And he said, what should I say? Prabhupada said, chant the verses of the Śrī Īśopaniṣad, will purify the whole atmosphere.
That's a perfect setup. So the first verse from the Śrī Īśopaniṣad goes like this: Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnavadaya Purnameva Vaiśeṣika. This is the invocation mantra, and it says that the personality of Godhead is perfect and complete. And as he is completely perfect, even though everything that emanates from him is also perfect in itself, And even though so many complete units emanate from the perfect or complete whole, that original personality from whom they all emanate remains the complete balance, which means he's not diminished. He can unlimitedly expand his energies, but it doesn't mean that he becomes exhausted. His energies are inexhaustible. And a key phrase in Srila Prabhupada's purport to this first verse is that all forms of incompleteness we experience are due to incomplete knowledge of the complete whole. This is encouraging because oftentimes we think the world's out of order. And the Śrī Īśopaniṣad is pointing out that it's not that the world's out of order, it's in perfect order. It's just that my relationship with it is in imbalance, and I also don't have complete knowledge about why things are happening to me. And when I do have a complete understanding, by understanding the Śrī Īśopaniṣad, for instance, then the ways in which I interact with the world and with other people and with whatever happens to me become well adjusted. The second verse of Śrī Īśopaniṣad says, Īśavasyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bunjita magrada kasasudanam. And this says, everything animate or inanimate within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for oneself which are set aside as one's quota, and one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. This verse, number one, solves all problems. We have a problem of mistaken proprietorship in the world. When I think that something belongs to me, then I stew over it because I'm afraid to lose it. And when we read this verse and understand it and accept it, we're cleared of this kind of anxiety. And this is one of the great secrets of life, is to understand that everything's controlled by the Lord and everything's owned by the Lord. It doesn't mean we don't have anything. Tena tyaktena punjita means that there's plenty that the Lord has set aside for us, for our quota. And we can use that, but we shouldn't encroach and try to take more. And if we keep what Srila Prabhupada calls the Īśavasya spirit, meaning Isha means the controller. And if we let Kṛṣṇa be the controller and we act as instruments of the controlled, then we can live a life unencumbered by the idea that I own something or I'm the controller of all circumstances. In fact, the ones that saved me in a circumstance where I was feeling great anxiety about a reversal that had happened to me. And I called one of my friends, and he immediately relieved my anxiety, which had been acute, because I hadn't been able to properly sleep for a few days, worrying about the situation. And the first thing he said to me, well, you're not the Supreme Ishvara. And as soon as those words touched my ears and went into my heart, I thought, oh, thank you. Thanks for reminding me. Therefore, I offer this verse as a panacea, a way in which anyone can feel well adjusted in the world by remembering, I'm not the Supreme Controller. Would you like to try saying it? No, everyone say it. I see a few mouths not moving. Go. 1, 2, 3.
I am the Supreme Controller.
Yeah, of course it doesn't mean if we do something sloppy or reckless and then it goes wrong, we shouldn't also use this and say, well, I'm not Supreme Controller, that's Krishna's fault. That's not the idea behind it. But the idea is we do our due diligence, we do the best we can, and we should do everything we can do, due process. But we should know that everything depends on Kṛṣṇa for its completion. And if it doesn't seem to be complete, even though we did our due diligence, there must be a good reason. There must be a benevolent reason. This is one of the other implications of this verse, as expressed in Srimad Bhagavatam by Lord Brahma, who said, Taptenu kampam susamikshamanam punjana evatma kritam vibhakam hridbhagvapur vir viradam namaste jivetan yo mukti pade sadayabhag. There's a A few more people want to come in, so everyone please move up. We'll only be here for a few minutes, so however uncomfortable you may feel, it'll be over soon. And in this, one of the acharyas of our sampradaya says, if you adjust the way you see the world and whatever happens to you, to understand that it's benevolent, it's meant for ultimate purification and perfection, then if you're able to maintain this attitude, then you'll be a perfect candidate for the spiritual world. And what's more, you won't be overwhelmed by the circumstances of the material world. Or you may be overwhelmed by the circumstances of the material world. It's hard to say we won't be, but we'll know how to process it. And come to safety in the understanding that everything's happening by the arrangement of Kṛṣṇa. Which brings us to the next verse of Śrī Īśopaniṣad, which says, Kurvan eveha karmani jivishek samaha evam tvai nanyate tostina karma lipyate nare. In this verse, the author, which apparently Swayambhuva Manu, is speaking about how if one is able to remember that everything belongs to Kṛṣṇa, and that Kṛṣṇa is the Supreme Controller, he's benevolent and he's set aside a quota for us to use in the world, then kurvane veha karmani jijivishak tamsama. We won't be affected by the normal course of karma, which is a kind of debt we incur in this material world when we claim to control and own certain things and we use them for ourselves. It's very much akin to the U.S. tax code, because in the U.S. tax code, those who are CPAs know that when you adjust your financial situation so that you don't really own anything, then there's nothing to take. If you, for instance, have a trust or an LLC, or there's ways in which you defer taxes, not avoid, don't do that, but defer taxes, then when you look at the bottom line, you say, oh, it comes out to zero. Why? Because in the long form that you fill out, oh, I used everything in service of the corporation. And there's really nothing left. And in a similar cosmic sense, kurvane veha karma niji jivishek shatam sama evam tvainanyate dosina karma lipite nare. For a person who doesn't claim proprietorship and uses everything in the service of the Lord, when the tax collector comes, the karmic tax collector, and say, what do you owe? It's like, I don't owe anything. I don't have anything. And there's nothing to take. So Śrī Īśopaniṣad encouraged us and said, if you live like that, you can go on living without being encumbered in this world. And it says you can go on live for hundreds of years without being entangled in the material world. Then he says, Asuryanamate loka andhena tamasavrita tamste britya vigachanti yekichatma hano janaha. Those who don't subscribe to these principles and they ignore them and they set out on their own, asuryanamate loka, then the result is that one may be degraded by the system of the material world. In the Bhagavad Gita, Kṛṣṇa does not present a fanatical view. Rather, he gives a clear idea of the way the energies of the material world, ways in which the energies of the material world work, and what is our relationship with them. And he indicates that as souls, we have free will, and we can choose where we'd like to go. For instance, in the Gita, Kṛṣṇa says, Yanti deva vrata devan pitrin yanti pratirvrata bhutani yanti bhuteja yanti mam yajino pimam. And that is, you're free to move about the universe or go beyond it. You can go wherever you want. Yanti, yanti, yanti means help yourself, go in any direction you wish. Wherever you point your attention, your worship, and so forth, you'll go there. The implication And in the context of that verse is choose wisely. Later in the Śrī Īśopaniṣad, we'll hear Anyadeva hur sambhavad, anyadahura sambhavad, iti shushrumadhiranam yenas tadvichakshide. And that is that one result is obtained by giving your attention, your worship. By the way, the word worship comes from the word worth. And it used to be worth ship. Ship you put on the end to make a noun, but it's by Sunday rules apparently, or just by the way language gets, it morphs over time. It became worship. In other words, what's most important to you? Where do you put your attention? Where should you put your energy? Worship is a kind of investment of our heart and our energy, so what you worship is what you value, so it's worship. And if you put your energy in a particular direction, you'll end up going there. And this is what Kṛṣṇa is indicating to us. Be careful where you invest your energy. Be careful where you give your heart, where you worship, because as a musician in the 1980s said, watch out, you might get what you're after. That is, you may think, I want this, I want that, gimme, 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 but have you looked at it carefully and seen, and have you seen what you're going to end up with if you go that direction? So Śrī Īśopaniṣad says, live a reasonable life and point your attention towards the Supreme. And if not, then by default, you'll find yourself in a dark place. That's what the verse says. Asurya nama te loka. Asurya means if you live a life without light. Surya means the light, and it means, Asurya means you live without the light of knowledge of the Shastra and guidance by the saints. If you live on your own, willy-nilly, and do whatever you want, Asurya nama te loka andhena tamasavita. You could find yourself in a dark place. And we don't want to go to a dark place, right? And then Śrī Īśopaniṣad says, Surya nama te loka andhena tamasavrita tamste pratyabhigashanti ekichat manhom jana. What's the next verse? Ane jarikam manaso javiyo naina deva nuvan purvanashat tadavato nyana ki tishtat tasmina poma tarisha dadati. Which means that it's pointing to the object of our meditation, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Could you read the translation?
Although fixed in his abode, the personality of Godhead is swifter than the mind and can overcome all others running. The powerful demigods cannot approach him. Although in one place, he controls those who supply the air and rain. He surpasses all in excellence.
And the next verse starts.
Tadejati
Tadejati tadure tadvantike tarantarasya sarvasya taru sarvasya payataha. And that means Supreme Lord is far away, but he's very near as well. He's within everything, and yet he's outside of everything. So there's this sense, where is God? Two fish in the water, and one looks at the other and says, there's this theory of water. Do you believe in it? The other one said, no, I don't believe in it. I've never seen it myself. And in a similar way, we're subsumed by all of God's, we're surrounded, we're ensconced by God's energies. We're made of God's energies. Prahlad Maharaj says, Yasmin yato yarhi yenacha yasya yasma yasma yata yatura yad utarastha twa para parova bhava karoti vikaroti pavak subhava. That everything, whatever you're getting, your paycheck from your company. Does anybody get a paycheck? Please say yes.
Yes.
You see me afterwards too. And and he said, your parents, your house, your car, the ground you walk on, everything is a manifestation of your energy, he's saying to the Supreme Lord. Yasmin yato yarhi yenacha yas yad yasmad yasmayata yadutaras twa para parova bhava karoti vikaroti pratak sabhava sanchodi tasarakilam pavatak swarupam. It's all your form, everything. However, we miss the forest for the trees. We don't see the Lord. He's far away, but he's very near as well. How is it that he's far away, and how is it that he's very near as well? It's all because of our consciousness. If we become aware that the Supreme Lord, as Kṛṣṇa says, is our benefactor, he's a surit, that he's also the one who's supplying everything to us, and that whatever we give to him is for our benefit, and we develop a sense of gratitude, appreciation for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and perhaps extend ourselves toward him, then in the Bhagavad Gita, Kṛṣṇa says, Ye yata mam prapadyante tamstataiva bhajamyaham mama manuvartanta manusha partasarvasha. That I'll reciprocate. That's one aspect of Krishna consciousness that's very relatable. And that is that Krishna is responsive. He's always responsive. And this is one of the main points that Krishna makes in the Bhagavad Gita and elsewhere. We have a sense for that in general. If you've ever heard somebody say, I prayed to the universe, I needed a new car, and I prayed to the universe, dear universe, please give me a car. Have you ever heard something like that?
Yes.
I've heard it a lot. I'm from California. And the universe gave me a car. We have a sense that there's, some people would say, a force out there that knows us, a great spirit that is aware of everything, and that everybody's interconnected by that universal intelligence. Many cultures have expressed this. Many poets have expressed that. On Walden Pond, Emerson, Thoreau going out into nature, even the Romantics talking about how everything's interconnected. We're all on the same spiritual grid. This is one of the themes of Śrī Īśopaniṣad. What is it? Tarejati, tannaijati, tadure, tadmanti. Very far away, very, very near as well. Dependent on our disposition towards Kṛṣṇa. If our attitude is that I'm independent, then Bhagavatam says, Bhayam dvitiya abhinibesha tasyad. Fear arises because we feel separate from God. But when we embrace the idea of Bhagavad Gita, which is be a servant of Kṛṣṇa, just take shelter of Kṛṣṇa. Manmana bhavamad bhakto madhyaji mananaskuru. Very simple instructions means think of Kṛṣṇa and worship Kṛṣṇa. Bow down to Kṛṣṇa. Then you'll feel a reciprocation. And the more you do that, the closer you'll feel Kṛṣṇa is. He's not far away at all. And he assures us in the Bhagavad Gita that he's very close to us. We'll do a few more. What's the next verse? Yes, tu sarvani bhutani atmani vanu pashiti sarva bhuteshu chatmanam tato na vijigupsute. So there's a way in which the Śrī Īśopaniṣad then says, when one's able to develop a vision, the vision, that every soul is a part of Kṛṣṇa, everything in the universe is a part of Kṛṣṇa, janmad yasayata, everything comes from Kṛṣṇa, it's interrelated, and that Kṛṣṇa is the supreme controller, he's controlling all energies. Yastu sarvani bhutani atmani vanu pashati sarva bhuteshu chatmanam tato na vijugupsade. Vijugupsade means you won't hate anybody when you see that way. You hate anybody? That's all right, I shouldn't ask that question. Are you annoyed with anybody? So there's a sense that one develops in Kṛṣṇa consciousness of universal interconnectivity, and that everything comes from one divine source. And when you see that everything's part of Kṛṣṇa, and everyone is a part and parcel of Kṛṣṇa, as he says in the Bhagavad Gita. Mamai vamsho jiva loki jiva bhuta sanatana. All living beings are like parts and parcels. There's a sense of universal connectivity. I was going to say brotherhood, but I don't think that works anymore. Personhood, spiritual connectivity. Then he says, Yasmin sarvadi bhutani atmai vad bhuvijanataha tatrako mohkashoka ekatvam anupashyataha. So, anupashyata means that, anu means to follow and pashyati means to see. So the Śrī Īśopaniṣad advises us that we should follow the method and the way of seeing that the great devotees see. We shouldn't imitate them and say that I see everybody equally when we don't. We don't have to artificially claim something that we're not feeling and then think that we'll ascend to that position by artificially doing it. But what it does say is, anupashyati means that you should see through the eyes of these directives given in the Śrī Īśopaniṣad so that you have a reasonable way of looking at the world and seeing how everything's interconnected. There's serendipity within everything because everything's working by Krishna's arrangement, and all living beings are part of Kṛṣṇa. So yasmin sarvani bhutani atmani vanupashyati sarva bhutani. What is it? Yasmin sarvani bhutani atmai vad bhuvijanataha tatra ko mahakashoka ekatvam vanupashyati means that it's asking a question. If you do that, if you follow these basic tenets of the Śrī Īśopaniṣad, what difficulty will there be for you? Tatrako mahakashoka. Where will there be any shoka or lamentation for you if you're able to see like this? It'll solve your problems. Our problems are seeing something different from Kṛṣṇa, seeing that whatever's happening to me is not for my ultimate purification. But he said, if you're able, anupashyati, to follow this system of the Śrī Īśopaniṣad and see the world, everything belongs to God. Everything's happening for a reason by his arrangement. He's very close to me and reciprocal. And whatever I do towards him, he'll respond accordingly. He's there constantly, never lazy or inattentive, always ready to respond to my mood. And if I amend my mood and anupashyati, see that I'm a servant, how can I serve you? Then Kṛṣṇa will respond in kind and take you as one of his own. And then you'll have a good life and you won't have any problems. Om Tat Sat. There's so much more in Śrī Īśopaniṣad, but our time is limited. I'll just take 2 questions and then we have to go, because we're going to Baltimore to do the Sunday program there. And we have to make a stopover before we get there to get our stuff, because we're going to stay overnight and be in Baltimore for Monday morning also. Yes, Prabhu.
Had you prepared that you were going to talk about the Śrī Īśopaniṣad, or was that more spontaneous?
No, I prepared because you told me upstairs
I'm
to
very
talk about it.
impressed that you book so well. We used to chant it going out on Sankirtan, doing those.
Yeah, we go way back. We used to sleep in this room, actually, when I lived here. And I can't remember who did it for me, but I wanted to get up on time, so it was one of the Pujaris. And I asked him, when I was sleeping here on the floor in my sleeping bag, that he would come in and take the Maha water and dump it on my face. And every morning, he was so nice. He'd come in and just go, I'd splash, and I'd wake up. You can't sleep when you have cold water in your face, and we'd start our day here. And it was so nice because going, coming, whenever we went anywhere, Palaka Prabhu would be chanting verses. We'd all be thinking of these books, remembering them, chanting them, and then we'd go out and distribute them together. He still goes out every day and distributes books. And then it just becomes a part of your life. Thank you. Yes, Prabhu.
I had a question. So
Yeah.
initially, I know you mentioned about the conflict that you want to have.
Hold that
peace
really close. Yeah.
So I know you mentioned earlier on that if you want to have peace, see everyone the same as everyone coming from Kṛṣṇa. But then you also said earlier on that most people will not have a problem if they only keep what they got, which means that if I don't steal your home or your property, I'm at peace with you, right? But what if I steal your property in your house? How would you then not get upset with me? So is that like a conflict?
Yeah, there's always conflict here in this world. And there's a way in which one must do one's due diligence. It's not that we take the spirit of these verses that one should see equally, or that we should be equipoised and then become a doormat. If someone wants to kill us, for instance, we should defend ourselves. The Srimad Bhagavatam says it's prime duty of every living being to stay alive, because you have a duty to do in your human life, which is to become self-realized. And if someone wants to take your body from you, you're supposed to defend yourself. And if you have your quota of property, you're supposed to defend yourself also, and put a fence around it, lock it up. Our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, locked everything up. He didn't leave anything to chance, because he saw, although this is all paraphernalia to be used in Krishna's service, well, I won't start with although. Let me rephrase this. Because Prabhupada saw that everything I have is paraphernalia to be used in Krishna's service, he was more careful than most people about protecting it, because he saw this is Krishna's stuff. And therefore he was protective of it, because he knew he had to engage it in Krishna's service. So in a civilized society, there's a way in which we anticipate some may not follow the proper course or the laws, and therefore there should be a sense of people being protected by those who are authorized to do so. So it's nothing that takes us out of the realm of the ordinary ways one organizes society and said, because of these verses, it means we should throw caution to the wind. I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but a lot of times when we bring up these points, even about humility, when I speak in corporate audiences, people say, yeah, but then doesn't everybody just walk all over you? And if somebody offends you or takes things away, then do you just let them do that? No, you don't. You have to do your due diligence in your normal life and anticipate the fact that there may be these transgressions, and so you should be careful. It doesn't preclude one seeing everything as paraphernalia to be used in Krishna's service. And philosophically, if somebody transgresses, there are ways in which the Srimad Bhagavatam talk about the highest and most saintly consideration, which is that somehow or other, this came to me for my own purification. That was the verse I said earlier, Taptenu kampam susamikshamano. Bunjane mahatma kritam vipakam means that if something comes, somebody takes something from me, we do our due diligence. Should just throw caution to the wind or not protect your stuff. But if it happens, and it will, then we consider somehow or other Krishna was teaching me a lesson. And there's a way in which this person who took it from me was an instrument of my karma. A devotee named Peter Burwash, who ran Peter Burwash International, he was a businessman. Peter Burwash International is an international tennis company. He lived in Hawaii and he traveled all over the world. He asked his employees to follow the 4 regular principles. And he also had quite a bit of association with Prabhupada in Hawaii. And once he had given some money for something, and somebody absconded with it. And Prabhupada when he went to Prabhupada to complain, Prabhupada said, don't be angry with the instrument of your karma. And he kept that as one of the pillars of his life. Don't be upset with the instrument of your karma. Well, that brings us to the end of our time together. It's so pleasant, though, isn't it? To sit in this temple room. I like it down here. And it's kind of cool. And it's a hallowed room because Prabhupada sat in here in 1976. He sat right on that Pyas house, and Palika and I were here. And he gave numerous classes here and went on walks various places in the morning around Washington, D.C. And I'll remember this time we had together. It was an uproarious yajna today, wasn't it? A cacophony of spiritual sound vibration like I haven't heard in a long time. And outrageously fun and spiritually uplifting. And now we get to go do it again in another location. That's the fun part about being in an international society, or specifically the International Society for Kṛṣṇa Consciousness. You can land anywhere and get out and do it over again. In fact, if you want to do, there was a movie when I was a kid called The Endless Summer. I really wanted to be like that. They were surfers, and all they did was fly around the globe, and they made sure they were always in summertime. I had the poster on my wall. And they would go there and they just surf. And when it started, the waves would come down, or the summer would start to change into the next season, they would fly to the next place. And we can do that in Kṛṣṇa consciousness. Just always stay in the vibration wherever you go. You can be, what do we call it? Not the endless summer. Give the endless something? What? The endless kirtan. Let's go for the endless kirtan. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Shri Panchatattva, Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan, Shri Shri Sita Ram, Lakshman Hanuman, Shri Shri Gauri Tai. If you so desire, please empower all of us here today to, in friendship, work together to help one another to become Kṛṣṇa conscious and always keep the transcendental vibration going. And also, please empower us to spread Kṛṣṇa consciousness to people all over the world by distributing Śrī Īśopaniṣad. And if you don't have a copy, please today go purchase one from somebody. And I would also recommend get a case. Get a whole case of Śrī Īśopaniṣad, keep them in your car for the next couple of months, and you'll meet people wherever you go, and you can just say, here, check this book out. And if you want to know how to do that, ask Palika. He's the expert on the planet, how to give books out to thousands, tens of thousands of people. Yeah, you can give them out for free if you pay for them. But get Śrī Īśopaniṣad today, please. It's like a run on the bank. You go up there, we want our Śrī Īśopaniṣad. It's like, uh-oh. We may have to close down. Thank you. Vajrakalpa Rishcha, Kripa Sindhu